Well, actually, the hunt for news doesn't take long these days, and I have much more than I really needed. So I've got several things to share with you, various topics. So stick with me, folks, and I'll be right back in a minute. Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and I've got lots and lots to share with you on this one. So let's get going. The first one is Ratcliffe came out and said that the intelligence community doesn't believe that Hunter Biden's laptop and the emails on it are part of some Russian disinformation campaign because there's no intelligence that supports that. It's simply not true. However, there are some people who are still left in the FBI, etc., who have signed a document saying, oh, but wait, we think it's Russian disinformation. So Ratcliffe is dealing with his own snakes right now, I think. And he wanted to come out and say, make this statement because that's what the Democrats and, quote, the career people, in the bureaucracy that's our government these days. And you know what I've always said about when they're career people. That's just code word for people from the deep state. So anyway, this is the clip that he said this. So listen carefully.
It is Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, who, as you pointed out on Friday, said that the intelligence community believes that Hunter Biden's laptop and the emails on it are part of some Russian disinformation campaign. Let me be clear. The intelligence community doesn't believe that because there's no intelligence that supports that. And we have shared no intelligence with Chairman Schiff or any other member of Congress that Hunter Biden's laptop is part of some Russian disinformation campaign. It's simply not true.
Now, I saw a couple of videos that Louis Gohmert did. And, he was saying, well, Schiff is putting out misinformation. And, I beg to differ with Louis. I love the guy, but man, he's not giving out misinformation. He's giving out disinformation. He knows it's not true, but he's putting it out anyway because he's trying to save his skin. So, just in case you haven't seen, I'm not going to deal with this directly, but the CNN reporter, he's CNN and New Yorker, as I understand it, was suspended because on a Zoom call, he did some bad stuff. Okay? He kind of exposed part of himself that he shouldn't do on purpose. I mean, he says he thought the video was off and the audio was off, but I think it's kind of like, oh, my Twitter account got hacked. So it's just really, really creepy. It's almost like all of a sudden these pervs are coming out from everywhere. But anyway, I wanted to share that with you. You can watch this again if you need to. But anyway, the link will be down below. Well, I wanted to show you this one. It's got music in it, so I'm going to bypass that. Besides, there's no speech or anything. But check this out. Okay, so they're panning on her, and she's just kind of waving. But look, there's like 3 people. There's 3 people. That's all there is. And they stop panning. Why do you think they stop panning? Because they don't have any more people there. Or probably very few. They sure don't want to show you what's going on. And, that's one of the things that I really appreciate with the right side broadcasting. When they do the rallies, they pan the crowd all the time. And it's really good to see that. So, anyway. And POTUS had 2 different rallies today. Oh my goodness. I can't keep up with this guy. He's wearing me out. So, anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. There's just nobody. You can see, if this were a Trump rally, you'd be seeing all the people in the background. But oh no, you can't. And they stop the camera before you see anybody else. So I'm kind of thinking there weren't a lot of people there. Yeah, anyway. All right. Well, there's some questioning about the Michigan governor because when she did an interview on Sunday, she had this sitting there very obviously placed. And it's an 8645. So you gotta kind of wonder if she was putting out some kind of code. I mean, that's what they're speculating on here. So I just thought I'd bring it to your attention and let you read the article about it and see what you think. This thread right here by Carlos Osweda is a pretty interesting thread, I thought. I don't always agree with this guy, but I did agree with what he's saying here, because he says, game over. President Trump will be reelected in a landslide. For the first time in American history, the Republicans have beaten the Democrats in new voter registration. And, you know, I've said this before, that really the Republicans were focusing on getting new people signed up, people who had never voted before, or people who hadn't voted in a very long time. And those are really the people they're trying to reach. And I think they're not taking that into consideration when they're doing these polls. Plus, a lot of the polls aren't looking at the people who have switched, because there have been several that have switched, and almost all of them, not all, of course, but the majority of them have switched from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party. And they're not taking that into consideration. That doesn't factor in their polls. So I think, yes, probably the truth is that, the Democrats they're not in as good a standing as they think they are, or at least as they're putting out in the public. And he goes on, he says, the Democrats go into the election with the same number of voters as they had in 2016, and a very large percentage of those Democrats will be voting for Trump. Biden is done. How strange. Could there be a reason why this happened? Actually, there are almost too many reasons to count. And then he starts listing them. Biden is senile. Biden has a 47-year career of no accomplishments. Biden's platform is full of leftist radicalism that will destroy the country. Biden says we must elect him to learn his positions. Biden is 100% negative. I mean, he goes on and on with all of them, but, you're pretty well aware of those. And he said, that's just off the top of my head. Trump fooled them into thinking that social media is the most important thing in the world. So he tweeted, every Trump supporter who hates his tweets needs to get down on their knees and thank the heavens above that he tweeted. That was all it took to distract an entire political party. They missed every single thing I saw. Some of us never lost our certainty that Trump would be easily reelected. And a lot of you reading this will sadly disagree with me. So he's not real happy with that. But you think that the Democrats have superpowers, so you're not playing with a full deck. The Democrats plowed ahead with their ludicrous notion that everybody hates Trump so much that they'll elect a potted plant to get rid of him. So the Democrats ran a potted plant. The infuriating thing about defeatists is that they don't know anything, but they opine anyway. If you don't have factual information on a topic, you're not qualified to make a judgment. You're not qualified to make a value judgment on it. Here's the worst mistake the Democrats made. The result of violence, verbal attacks, psychological attacks, threats of violence, threats of property destruction, threats of impacting employment, threats of academic retaliation, threats of career destruction, and threats of public exposure. The Democrats made it impossible to know who supports Trump. If you have no blooming idea what Trump's level of support is, you can't win. There's no way to know who you have to reach or how to do it. The Democrats were Trump's best allies. The final on the Democrat horror show was the nonstop lecturing from athletes and entertainers. Add the rabid invective from Hollywood icons, and the implosion of the party is complete. There wasn't a single thing the Democrats did right. And now they get to pay the butcher's bill. Democrats told us in unambiguous language that unless we turned against Trump, they'd continue to behave like savages. Of course this backfired. All they had to do was look at London during both world wars. Well, then he goes on into this, the death of the Zeppelin, and he does a quote from one of the guys. So it was just very interesting what he had to say here. I'll leave the link down below. You can read the whole thread if you want to. But pretty much, I think I agree with him, because the way that they've done it, the Democrats have made it so that people are not going to say who they vote for. This is something I've noticed a lot as I'm driving along in, the countryside, or especially up in Pete Buttigieg's city. I see virtually no signs, no political signs. And I think part of the reason for that is because with the climate we have, people are afraid that if they put a sign out for a certain candidate, especially, Trump, then they'll be attacked. Their property will be damaged. And so everybody's kind of laying low. And I mean, I've seen it like all around here. And I realize that we're a very Republican area. But even here, people are not putting up the signs. They are going to vote. I mean, I hear them all the time. And whenever I wear my Trump mask out there, I only do it when I have to, when I go into a business establishment. And I do it mostly because of the business owner, because it's not their fault that the mask mandate is on. And if I give them any guff, it's not their fault. And, there's nothing they can do about it. They could be fined if, the people don't obey it. So I don't want to cause trouble for the store owners, but I rarely go into stores these days. It doesn't matter much anyway. I don't go out much. But I did want, when I do go out, I have a Trump mask, and I've had all kinds of people have complimented me on that Trump mask. So I know for sure that there's a lot of Trump supporters in this area. It's just people aren't being very outspoken with it because they're afraid, and people have lost their jobs because they supported Trump. It's sad, and I'm going to show you something later on that is part of that. Well, just in case you want to have some camouflage here, I thought you'd like to see this, because this is a good tactic for being able to share things that maybe the powers that be don't want you to share. So this is one way. You just use the Wayback Machine, and evidently the archived version will go through okay. So that's something you can do. That's a tip from one of the researchers. And because we need to get things out there, and especially things like this, fire intentionally set inside ballot box in LA County, officials say. And yeah, so they just torched a bunch of the ballots. Yeah, if you can't win, honestly, do that kind of garbage. I wonder exactly, I don't know the area, but Baldwin Park, I wonder if that's like a Republican area. I don't know. Just a question. Just kind of wanted to know on that. But yeah, that kind of stuff is happening. And here is a whole list. So folks, you wanted to know, the researchers have been keeping track. And here are tons of them. So I'll put the link to this down below. And you've got all these articles you can go through and you can check them out. When people say, oh, but it doesn't exist. Yeah, you just start sharing those. Okay? Now, this one is one of the researchers from the board, evidently, because it was posted as a notable. And I am not going to play it, but I do want to make you aware of his situation. Evidently, he has a 6-year-old girl. And his ex, I don't know that they were married or anything, but the mother of the child is involved with someone that has some political connections. And because of that, there's obvious abuse going on. The girl has told him several times. He's reported it, and he doesn't have custody. So he is desperately trying to figure out what to do. But most of all right now, he needs prayers. And so we do know that prayer is powerful, and he really needs it right now so the situation can be resolved. He explains it all here. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to play it, but you can go through and listen. And then down here, I was noticing somebody was saying they tried the hashtag that he had said, Justice for Supergirl, and it said there were no matches. And so he said, go to my page, and that is his page right there. All right, so I went to his page. Well, I searched for him, And this is what it said. This is exactly the same thing it did for me the other day. And I haven't followed him. And I think what happened with Agent Applebutt was the situation was I actually followed him after I found him. And I think because of that, then when I did the search, it came up. But this one I haven't followed. And look, it says there's nobody there with that name. But when you go over here, then you can find, see, you can find him. And sure enough, there actually is a person whose name is that. And there it is. So, it's very interesting. When it comes to the hashtag, he said, well, I came up with nothing. It was totally blank all along here. So I put one in and it did bring it up, but I don't know why it's not showing this hashtag. So anyway, I think he's genuine. I can't say for sure, but we can still pray. That's for sure. We can always pray. And if the situation is true, and I think it probably is, then there's definite prayers that need to go on. And it's really sad, in my opinion, that people are put in positions like this where the child is put in danger because somebody has connections. And so I don't know what the solution is for him. I recommended maybe he check out the U.S. Attorney, the FBI. Of course, now, how do you trust the FBI at this point? Or maybe the state police or something. But it sounds to me like he's really in a tough situation. I think he's in New York. I think that's what he said. Erie County. I think maybe there's an Erie County in Pennsylvania too, but I don't know. I know there's a city called Erie. So I don't know, but he does mention it. And if you could watch this and pray for him, that's the biggest thing we can do for him right now. I wish there was something else, but that's all I can think of at this point. Okay, so anyway, Rush Limbaugh, I guess, I didn't get a chance to hear him today, and he gave an update on his cancer, and he does kind of refer to it. This is part of it. It's only a couple minutes long, but it's part of what he has to say, and he did allude to the fact that it's terminal, which then he kind of expounds on it and says, well, we're all terminal. When you think about it, we will all die at some point unless the Lord returns. But he just sounded like it was more final than that. I don't know. I need to find the whole clip and listen to it, but it was kind of emotional. And I didn't know until just the other day. I did hear him say that, yes, this is him. It doesn't have a blue check, but Real R. Limbaugh is actually him. I was hesitant to follow because there's so many popping up right now that are not the real person, but this is him. So even though he doesn't have a blue check, it is him. Anyway, I'll leave the link down below, and you can follow him if you want to. Well, Evan Kilgore here always comes up with some good things. For the record, Donald Trump did not shut down your business, close your churches, make you lose your job, bar you from your family members' births and funerals, or force you to isolate at home for the past 7 months. Your state governor did that. And people need to be reminded of that. So if you live in one of those states where you had draconian measures taken by the Democrats in charge, you might want to point that out to people, because Trump didn't do these things. He allowed the governors to run their state, which is what our 10th Amendment says, and they mismanaged. So we need to put the pressure on these governors to straighten up and fly right, because that's more in our power than the federal government. And that's one of the reasons why our framers put it that way, is because they wanted to make sure that the power was more localized, and that people who really did have the major ability to affect things were people that we might see or be able to contact on an easy basis. So it might be people that, live down the street from us, or The state capitol is much closer to us than Washington, D.C. And so it was to bring the power that affects us the most home. And that's one reason why our educational system is supposed to be more state-based. And not even state, but it's supposed to be local-based. Because, things that work in a big city are not going to work in a rural community. And when you have education, you need to be flexible and that kind of stuff. And so, anyway, I just thought that's a good point to bring out to people these days. Now, this one's a little disturbing because this guy says, so you get this in the mail, what do you do? And it says, dear neighbor, you have been identified by our group as being a Trump supporter. Your address has been added into our database as a target for when we attack should Trump not concede the election. We recommend that you check your home insurance policy and make sure that it is current and that it has adequate coverage for fire damage. You have been given fair warning. Can you imagine? And then it says, always remember that it was you that started this civil war. Be prepared to face the severe consequences of your preemptive actions against democracy. And I saw this also, the same letter, on Todd Starnes' site. So he had somebody, and the person that received it was somebody that he knew personally. So I do think this is out there. It's a little on the disturbing side, but they are ramping up. So be prepared. Please, no violence. We're trying to avoid violence. But, if someone attacks you, stand your ground, okay? So this was an interesting opinion piece, because what it pointed out is that there's such a difference between the way things were handled with Trump and Russia and the way things are being handled with the Biden-Ukraine stuff. And even down to the point where the Steele dossier was released. And if they keep telling you it wasn't released until after the election, that's a lie. It was out there before. So it came out like in October. So yes, it was out there. And they didn't care that it was vetted. It was not, nobody stifled it. Twitter allowed the links and everything to be shared. So if all of this was okay when it was happening to Trump, but now it's not okay that it's happening to Biden, there's just this big hypocrisy going on. And when you read through this, he mentions that this is not how the Trump people were treated. There was no, let's wait and see. Let's verify it. Oh, maybe it's Russian disinformation. Oh, no, there wasn't any of that. All they had to do was shake hands with Kislyak, and all of a sudden they were being grilled in front of Mueller. So, when you go through this is a very good opinion piece here. And, here they were. Big tech and media outlets kept an active log. All emails, phone calls, text messages, in-person encounters, etc. added up to over 140 contacts, quote, contacts by Trump and 18 associates. Nobody was charged over those contacts, as they were all legal, even if grossly distorted on social media, which is what they did. Like I said, all you had to do was shake hands with somebody who was Russian, and then all of a sudden, you were in trouble. So I thought it was very interesting how he points out and does a comparison and a contrast here between the two of them, because this whole thing with Hunter Biden, they're just trying to dismiss it. And I think they're just desperately hoping that they can put it off until after the election and that Joe's going to win and they won't ever have to think about it again, because that's exactly what will happen if Joe wins. We know that. But I did think this was really good, and I think it's probably something you'll want to read. So I'll leave the link to that down below. Geraldo Rivera came up with a really good point here. Notice how zero Democrats are denying that the Hunter Biden computer is not his, or that the information it contains is false. MSNBC, you are full of you-know-what. So I really agree with him on this. The very fact that nobody is denying it belongs to him is just, that settles it. Because if it's Russian disinformation, then how did it get on Hunter Biden's computer? Okay, that's a question you got to ask. So, Schiff is out there saying it's Russian disinformation, and it's like, yeah, I don't think so. Well, the House Judiciary GOP said, flagging for you, Adam Schiff, still want to blame the Russians, and here it is. This is the repair bill, and it has Hunter Biden's signature there. So, it makes no logical sense for it to be Russian disinformation, because the emails are from him, from Hunter Biden. And the pictures, you can't deny these pictures on there. There's a bunch of pictures and videos and stuff. Very bad. And, from what people have been saying, yes, crimes were committed. And so there's no way that he should get away with it and not be held accountable and arrested for the stuff that's on there. So again, if people say, well, it's Russian disinfo, then you got to say, wait a minute, then how did the Russian disinfo get on Hunter Biden's computer? Because it's Hunter Biden's computer, there's no denying that. Even his lawyer called him and wanted to get the laptop back. And it's like, if the lawyer, and he wrote an email too. So if the lawyer knew it wasn't his, didn't belong to Hunter Biden, why would he do that? I mean, the phone call and the note pretty much say, hey, this is his laptop. So Adam Schiff, you know what you're full of. And hooey. Well, the debate that's coming up is under debate. They've been renegotiating it, and I'm not sure. I know as of now that they are planning on cutting off the mics, which is really irritating, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens, especially if they decide that they're going to cut off Joe's mic more, or Trump's mic more than they do Joe's. We'll see what happens with that. But anyway, this was a letter from the Trump campaign to the commission, and this is what they had to say. They said, we write with great concern over the announced topics for what was always billed as the foreign policy debate in the series of events agreed to by both the Trump campaign and Biden campaign many months ago. The topics announced by moderator Kristen Welker, fighting COVID-19, American families, race in America, climate change, national security, and leadership, are serious and worthy of discussion. So those are the ones that they're planning on at this point. But only a few of them even touch on foreign policy. Indeed, almost all of them were discussed at length during the first debate won by President Trump over moderator Chris Wallace and candidate Joe Biden. Oh, they definitely have a sense of humor. Yeah, but you gotta have one in this day and age. You just have to. As is the long-standing custom, and as has been promised by the Commission on Presidential Debates, we had expected that foreign policy would be the central focus of the October 22nd debate. We urge you to recalibrate the topics and return to subjects which had already been confirmed. We understand that Joe Biden is desperate to avoid conversations about his own foreign policy record, especially since President Trump has secured historic peace agreements among Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. We recall that Biden's former Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, maintains that Biden has been, quote, wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. Biden has supported endless wars and given aid and comfort to our adversaries, including Iran, which was delivered pallets loaded with mountains of cash just as 4 Americans were released from captivity in Tehran. Biden also has advanced the interests of China over his 47 years as a Washington politician, putting their concerns ahead of those of American workers. New information recently revealed indicates that Biden himself was mentioned as a financial beneficiary of a deal arranged by his son, Hunter, and a communist Chinese-related energy company. If a major party candidate for president of the United States is compromised by the Communist Party of China, this is something Americans deserve to hear about. But it is not surprising that Biden would want to avoid it. It is completely irresponsible for the commission to alter the focus of this final debate just days before the event, solely to insulate Biden from his own history. Sadly, this is not the first time the commission has ceded to the wishes of the Biden campaign. Despite the obvious fact that millions of Americans began casting votes early this year, the commission steadfastly refused to move the debate schedule earlier or add another event, simply because the Biden campaign objected. In this example, the commission hid behind Biden's unwillingness to be flexible with the schedule, but has not hesitated to act unilaterally in other cases. As the most egregious example, the abrupt decision to switch the scheduled second debate on October 15th in Miami to a virtual setting was done without consultation with our campaign at all. Though the supposed reason for the change was public safety because of the coronavirus, the decision was made well before President Trump's medical condition became apparent and well before the president was medically cleared as having tested negative for the virus. Proof of the illogic of the commission's decision is the fact that this action resulted in both Biden and President Trump holding their own separate in-person events on the same night. If the commission's action was intended to prevent one in-person event, creating two such events, as a result, revealed the pointlessness of the decision, which I was thinking too. It's like, wait a minute, if you're not getting together because of COVID, then how does it make sense to have two places where people could get infected? It makes no sense. The commission's pro-Biden antics have turned the entire debate season into a fiasco, and it is a little wonder why the public has lost faith in its objectivity. The moderator for the first debate styled himself as a third combatant on stage, with almost all of his venom directed at President Trump. The moderator of the second debate, which was canceled, revealed his anti-Trump bias by accidentally tweeting what was intended to be a direct message to a well-known Trump critic, and then lying that his Twitter account had been hacked. Incredibly, the commission has yet to retract its public statement of support for the moderator's bogus hacking cover story, which resulted in the moderator's indefinite suspension from his place of employment. Finally, the moderator of the third debate now has decided to pursue topics almost wholly unrelated to the purpose of the event, which was to be focused on foreign policy. I mean, can you imagine electing a president without actually hearing what his views are on foreign policy? I mean, it's kind of important, wouldn't you think? It is our understanding from media reports that you will soon be holding an internal meeting to discuss other possible rule changes, such as granting an unnamed person the ability to shut off a candidate's microphone. It is completely unacceptable for anyone to wield such power, and a decision to proceed with that change amounts to turning further editorial control of the debate over to the commission, which has already demonstrated its partiality to Biden. This is reminiscent of the first debate in 2016 when the president's microphone was oscillated, and it is not acceptable. For the good of campaign integrity and for the benefit of the American people, we urge you to rethink and reissue a set of topics for the October 22nd debate with an emphasis on foreign policy. This is what the campaigns had agreed to, and it has been the tradition in past campaigns. We await your immediate reply to these concerns. We further advise you that there is no reason to consult with the Biden campaign before replying because we all know what they think. So I thought that was pretty good, putting that out. But again, as far as I've heard, that yes, they are going to be shutting off the mics. My question is, so if Biden would happen to become president, who's going to shut off the mic when he gets in front of Putin and President Xi? And, who's going to be doing that? You don't get that option. You can't shut off the mics when you're negotiating with other world leaders. It doesn't work that way. So, again, a little scary, but that's Joe. This is pretty funny. James O'Keefe goes in and he, I don't know exactly where it was. It says where it was, but he goes in to vote. And they say, well, do you have your ID? He says, well, I don't have my ID with me. I don't have a picture ID with me. So they let him fill out the stuff, all the paperwork. And he was doing it using Eminem's name. So his real name. So I thought this was very interesting. It's kind of fun to watch. I'll leave the link to it down below. Project Veritas just came out with another one today. That was a guy from Google who's just basically said, yeah, they've been messing around with the search. And, you know, when you go to search for Trump, everything comes up negative. When you go to search for Biden, everything comes up positive. But hey, you know, that's the way it works. It's all biased. And one of the important things he said is that after the 2016 election, that the company had to give people like sick days, and they had to give them safe spaces and pay for counseling because they needed therapy after Trump won. I mean, really, you know, it's just kind of scary that the company would do that. But anyway, are we surprised? No. Just a few pieces of information here, news-wise. Evidently, Keith Raniere wants to get a new trial. And he's presented these affidavits that say that he should have, because threats and intimidation by the prosecution, including the abuse or threatened abuse of legal process. So that's evidently, you know, that they would provide testimony that would have challenged material elements of the prosecution's case and exculpated the defendant of the most serious charges against him. So I kind of find that hard to believe. But anyway, he's supposed to be scheduled, he's scheduled for sentencing on the 27th. So they're trying to get it in supposedly by the 22nd. Yeah, by the 22nd, they're supposed to have submit its response to the motion for a new trial. So we'll see what happens there. I don't think he's going to get off. I think he's going to have to be sentenced. And speaking of courts, well, guess what? This came out on the 19th, and we have Ghislaine Maxwell was asking the court to stop the unsealing of a bunch of documents. Guess what? The court said, nope, we're going to unseal them anyway. So I don't know exactly when they're going to be unsealed. That's not included in this, but if you go down here to the bottom of it, it's not real long, but the conclusion is we have reviewed all of the arguments raised by defendant appellant Maxwell on appeal and find them to be without merit. We deny the motion to consolidate this appeal with the pending appeal in United States v. Maxwell. For the foregoing reasons, we also affirm the July 23rd, 2020 order of the district court, which is for the unsealing. So again, I don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but add that to everything that's coming out about Hunter. Oh, this could be really big. So that's happening. And then I wanted to bring this up because I know it's from the Washington Post. I understand. But if you read this, it's an opinion piece. And this is somebody who used to run the political advertising for Twitter. And he says, in his opinion, it's time for platforms to mute Trump. And he says social media platforms should silence the president until the winner of the election is clear. How can somebody read this and not see the bias in this? Oh, yes, silence Trump, but don't silence Biden. How can you even look at that? And, you know, we have two parties and you silence one of them before the election? How? How is that going to be fair? That's just not. Well, if you go through, this is Peter Greenberger is his name, and he launched and led the political advertising teams at both Google and Twitter. So yes, and he was upset because of some of President Trump's retweets, and especially the one about the SEAL Team 6 and other things, you know, some certain people. And so when you look at this, I mean, you just start going through it, and he's like, well, you know, it wasn't built for this, and Trump's taking advantage of it, and he's made himself brash, biting, abrasive, and belligerent. I think I'm surprised he didn't put all B's there. The alliteration of it is just, it's just funny. So anyway, down here he says, With millions of votes already cast and Election Day less than 3 weeks away, it is time for Twitter and Facebook to take away the digital bullhorn and mute the president. Trump should be silenced on both platforms until the winner of the election is determined. Again, how can somebody look at that and say, oh yeah, that's fair? Yeah, just silence one side because we don't like what they're saying. But if you go down here and you read through this, I do recommend reading it because, you know, even though it's from the opposing side, it gives you insights into what the left is actually thinking and how they view those of us who support President Trump. And if you go down here, you'll see that, you know, it's talking about Google restricted political entities' ad targeting abilities, created a transparency report. And then he talks about Facebook, after strenuously sticking to an unrestricted free speech position, relented this year, first joining Twitter in labeling posts specifically intended to suppress voter turnout, and then prohibiting new political ads starting the week before Election Day. So, you know, they have put a lot of these things on there because they're terrified Trump's tweets and posts reach millions of his followers directly. Oh no, the president can talk directly to us. How awful. And so, you know, of course, Twitter proclaimed itself the free speech wing for the Free Speech Party and has subsequently leaned on the newsworthiness of presidential tweets to protect their presence on the platform, even when they clearly violate its terms of service. No, they haven't been. They've been making them, you know, making it up that they're violating these terms of service. They're not. Clearly not. And if they were said by anybody on the left, they wouldn't be complaining about them. But anyway, so if you go down here, and of course they're scrutinizing all of the president's words because, you know, he needs to be checked. And it says he's a frequent calling guest to his preferred Fox News and Fox Business hosts because they treat him with respect. And if the other outlets would treat him with respect and fairly, he would go on there too. Not to mention the 2 hours with Rush Limbaugh he managed to carve out of a jam-packed recent Friday. Nobody assumes Trump will stop talking if Twitter and the other digital platforms turn him off. As Twitter chief executive Jack Dorsey put it a few years ago, don't you prefer to know what the president is thinking and doing rather than wondering what he's up to behind the scenes and guessing what he will do next? See, they hate it that they don't know what Trump's going to do next. They have no idea. They cannot predict this man. And this is the first president that they haven't been able to do that to. So it terrifies them. Anyway, so if you keep on going down here, you know, he opines on all kinds of stuff about his time there. And he says down here, the platforms have already told the president that they won't host comments suggesting that the election is being stolen. And he continued posting them. In other words, they don't want to hear anything about possible election fraud or mail-in ballot insecurity, you know, that there's possible problems going on with the ballots. I mean, they don't want to hear any of that. It's like they're an ostrich sticking their head in the sand, or, you know, somebody putting their hands over their ears going, la, 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 la. It's like, you know, it doesn't change the fact that it's real. You can keep denying it. You can say it's not true, but it doesn't change the actual fact. You're perfectly welcome to have your own opinions, but you don't have your own facts. You know, facts are facts. So it goes on, it says, why would anyone expect him to listen when they tell him not to question the outcome of the election? You can't question the outcome of the election. You see, that's what they're trying to do. Because if there's all this fraud, they want Trump to say, well, you know, whatever happens, happens, and I'm not going to question if there's voter fraud. Part of the reason that this is such an issue in this election is because there used to be this agreement that was a legal binding agreement, I guess, that allowed the Democrats to be in control pretty much of voter fraud. And it stifled what the Republican Party was allowed to do when it came to questioning any, you know, possible voter fraud that was going on. And I mean, it went back to like the 60s, I think, when it was put in place. And it recently just went out. So within the last few years. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it is no longer valid. So now the Republicans can challenge it, and the Democrats are doing their best to try to fight against that, because they know that if they're challenged on these things, there's going to be evidence. I mean, I really think that the people behind the scenes, the intelligence community, the good people in the intelligence community, have been collecting data through the 2018 election and everything. So when this comes up, they'll be able to say, oh, no voter fraud? Gee, let's look at this, and let's look at this, and let's look at this. And they're going to have actual evidence to be able to prove it. I really think that's the case. But anyway, it goes on and it says, why would anyone expect him to listen when they tell him not to question the outcome of the election or call on supporters to contest it with violence? You see, this is what they're trying to do right now, is they're trying to set it up with this whole violence thing. And we know, especially the 17 movement, they're really trying to frame with that. But that is not what any Trump supporters are doing. Trump has never called us to violence. And in fact, he has denounced it many times. And, you know, this is not the way we do it. If we believe that the outcome of the election is not fair, then we go the legal route. We follow the laws. We follow the way, the structure that's set up for us to be able to do that. And that's really what is happening. That's how we approach things as Trump supporters. That is our methodology. We don't go outside the law, and we don't create violence. Who does? Now remember the Transition Integrity Project. Remember, the only scenario that didn't involve any kind of violence was if Joe Biden won completely. That right there tells you it's not us. We're not the ones that are going to cause violence. It's the other side. The people on the left are the ones who've been causing violence so far, all those riots and everything. And they're the ones that have already planned, according to that Transition Integrity Project paper, they're the ones that have already planned on not accepting any defeat. They will not concede. Remember, Hillary said that. So then you go on down here. I mean, they use such horrible words to describe our wonderful president, and they're calling him all kinds of stuff. And then, you know, they, of course, try to tie him to the Michigan governor thing, even though, guess what? They found out that those people were tied to Antifa. You know, you haven't heard a whole lot about it since then, have you? Oh, no, oh, no. So they're trying to say Twitter and Facebook have indicated that they will take down any tweets that question the outcome of the election or encourage violence, regardless of who posts them. Well, that's a good sign that they will take down tweets that encourage violence. It's about time. How about, you know, Antifa and those people? Because there's an awful lot of those I've seen that they have posted, and Twitter left them up just fine and dandy. I guess violence from that side is okay. But then it says, but Trump is already doing this when he questions mail-in ballots. No, it's like you got mail-in ballots that are found in a ditch. Gee, maybe there's a problem. You have mail-in ballots that are in a mailbox that is put on fire. Gee, maybe there's a problem. I mean, there have been so many stories. I think you'd have to be an idiot not to know all these stories. And I showed them to you earlier. The researchers have put together a whole list of these things. So they do definitely exist. And so he says Trump is already doing this when he questions mail-in ballots and calls for an army of poll watchers. Well, there's nothing wrong with poll watchers. You go, you watch the polls, you make sure there's no shenanigans. And I still say the best way is to put body cams on these people that are messing with the ballots. You know, anybody who is handling ballots needs to have a body cam on. It needs to be recorded, or if not a body cam, there needs to be a camera on the ballots at all times. I mean, it's simple. It would not cost that much. It would be a great thing for them to do. And that way you can make sure nobody is messing around with them in a way they shouldn't. So anyway, then they go on, you know, the president's erratic and dangerous behavior calls not for a label on his tweets nor the hiding of his Facebook posts, but for him to be silenced until a clear winner is announced. Well, you're going to silence Joe Biden? There's nothing in here about silencing Joe Biden. Not at all. And it's simply not fair to silence one side and not the other. That's just not the American way. I'm sorry. And, it goes on here, and private corporations are not required to uphold the First Amendment. Well, but if you're getting Section 230, immunity, yes, you do need to uphold that. And if you're not going to uphold the First Amendment, then you don't get Section 230 immunity. Plain and simple. By the way, I just want to clarify. I'm not suggesting that we get rid of Section 230. I think it plays a very vital role. But the problem is we have these big tech corporations that are actually misusing it and abusing it and using it to be able to do other things they're not supposed to be able to. So my suggestion is strip them of their 230 immunity if they're not going to uphold the First Amendment. But even if they were, speech is not protected if you yell fire in a crowded theater. So that means they're comparing yelling fire in a crowded theater to saying, hey, those ballots were found in a ditch. So yeah, maybe there's some problems with ballots, the mail-in ballots. Or the ones that were printed without Trump's name on them. People got ballots that didn't even have Trump's name on it. I'm serious. And so, when you start reading through those, it's like, well, this mail person tossed a big bunch of ballots in the trash. And this guy walking down the street saw a bunch of ballots in a trash can. So you can't stifle that because that is real news. That is truth. And that's nothing like yelling fire in a crowded theater. It has nothing to do with each other. And Trump is telling people holding tiki torches to stand by to set the country aflame. He's not doing that in any way. First of all, the Americans that support Trump don't use tiki torches. We're pretty well armed, and they're not tiki torches, all right? And we're not planning on setting anything aflame. We're just going to go vote. And that's what we're doing. We're going to rallies, peaceful protests, and we're showing our support. So we're not the ones that set things on fire. We didn't set those different cities on fire. We didn't light fires and loot different stores and things. Oh no, that wasn't us. We didn't do that. Here they are, psychological projection, saying we're the ones that are going to do this. And that's what Trump is calling us to. Tiki torches. Right. We don't need that. We will do things legally, and it will be done. And then he goes on, tries to defend his position of a silence period. But again, he doesn't mention anything about Biden being silenced. And I think that's the real problem with this. But it was an interesting perspective to read. I do think you ought to read it. And then I wanted to share this with you because I guess this just happened recently. Wikipedia has decided to ban editors from expressing support for traditional marriage. So the Christian Post here has said this, and evidently what they had, it says volunteers who write and edit Wikipedia articles can no longer include on their profile page any user box, a badge expressing their beliefs that is against gay marriage. For example, one such user box states, this user believes marriage is between one man and one woman. And so they got all ticked off and triggered from that. So they decided, well, you know what? We got to cut everybody off. And we can't do that. Now, what I think is kind of funny is down here their reasoning. They, quote, represent an ugly tendency to condemn the views of others as outside the bounds of acceptable thought. Hello? Can you look in a mirror? I mean, serious. This is exactly what they're doing, is they're condemning the views of people who don't agree with them. And that's what they're accusing those people of doing, when all they did was put something on there saying, this is my view. And yet they go ballistic over it. So, I know you already know that Wikipedia is not a neutral point of view. But yeah, even this one, the co-founder had declared that the site's neutral point of view is dead. So It really is not neutral in any way, shape, or form. And we just have more confirmation of that, folks. But we already knew it, right? And tonight's shout out is Patriot 1943. Wanda Thacker gave me this one. I haven't had a chance really to go through and to check out the videos. So, go through, look at some of them. And if it's somebody that you want to follow, remember to click the subscribe button. And then also click the notifications. Make sure you click all so that the notifications will come through. Otherwise, you may not see them. And so we need to support more of these small channels. Remember, if you're going to suggest a small channel, you've got to put this in. Okay? It's got to have a hashtag in the comments. It's got to say hashtag channel. Otherwise, I'm not going to know. You're just putting in a link or something. I'm not going to know. So put the hashtag channel, and I won't be able to go back and search for them. So if you put that in, then I can search the comments and find the people that are suggesting channels. But you really need to do that for me, okay? Make sure you put that hashtag channel in there. And tell me why. Tell me what you like about the channel. Patriot 1943 has 13.8K subscribers. And I'm looking for channels that are under 50K. So make sure that if you're suggesting a channel, it's under 50K. We want to encourage those smaller ones because we've got to step up and fill the void of the others that we've lost. But keep your eye out. Sometimes in the comments, people say so-and-so has a backup channel here or there. So I'm trying to put those through as I can. They go into a review folder and then I have to approve them. So I get them out as much as I can, but like today was kind of a weird day and things didn't quite go the way I expected. So I don't always get a chance to approve them very fast. So I do get to them, but anyway. I also want to give you one more announcement that on Friday we are going to be having, I think that's the 23rd, isn't it? I don't know. But on Friday we are going to have another live stream and it'll be at 9:00 p.m. Eastern time. So if you can join us, we may have a little trivia thing. I'm still working on getting the trivia presents out. I'm sorry, I'm really slow at that kind of thing. But I kind of did too much over the weekend and I had to do some resting stuff. So I'm back in the saddle again, I hope. And I should be able to manage it. But I'll tell you, President Trump's wearing me out with all these rallies and stuff. I'm sorry, peaceful protests. It's getting tough to watch them all. I don't know how the man does it. I honestly don't. I wish I had just like a fraction of his energy. He is amazing. So that's what I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later.